Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 39 going with today's Third Age Thursday. This time around, it's our chance to return to a most familiar and wonderfully comfortable tale of the Third Age. Now, last week, we enjoyed the beginning of the party itself. Gandalf's fireworks, the 144 very special people invited to the VIP portion of the party. I'm sure the number was just a coincidence. And the feasting before the inevitable speech. So tonight, we'll pick up with Bilbo's speech. "My dear people," began Bilbo, rising in his place. "Hear, hear, hear," they shouted, and kept on repeating it in chorus, seeming reluctant to follow their own advice. Bilbo left his place and went and stood on a chair under the illuminated tree. The light of the lanterns fell on his beaming face. The golden buttons shone on his embroidered silk waistcoat. They could all see him standing, waving one hand in the air. The other was in his trouser pocket. "My dear Bagginses and Boffins," he began again, "and my dear Tooks and Brandybucks, and Grubbs, and Chubbs, and Burrowses, and Hornblowers, and Bolgers, Brace Girdles, Good Bodies, Brockhouses, and Proudfoots." "Proud feet!" shouted an elderly hobbit from the back of the pavilion. His name, of course, was Proudfoot, and well merited. His feet were large, exceptionally furry, and both were on the table. "Proudfoots," repeated Bilbo. "Also my good Sackville Bagginses that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 11 today." "Hooray! Hooray! Many happy returns!" they shouted, and they hammered joyously on the tables. Bilbo was doing splendidly. This was the sort of stuff they liked, short and obvious. "I hope you are all enjoying yourselves as much as I am." Deafening cheers. Cries of yes and no. Noises of trumpets and horns, pipes and flutes, and other musical instruments. There were, as has been said, many young hobbits present. Hundreds of musical crackers had been pulled. Most of them bore the mark Dale on them, which did not convey much to most of the hobbits, but they all agreed they were marvelous crackers. They contained instruments, small but of perfect make and enchanting tones. Indeed, in one corner, some of the young Tooks and Brandybucks, supposing Uncle Bilbo to have finished, since he had plainly said all that was necessary, now got up an impromptu orchestra and began a merry dance tune. Master Everard Took and Miss Melilot Brandybuck got on a table and with bells in their hands began to dance the Springle Ring, a pretty dance, but rather vigorous. But Bilbo had not finished. Seizing a horn from a youngster nearby, he blew 3 loud hoots. The noise subsided. "I shall not keep you long," he cried. Cheers from all the assembly. "I have called you all together for a purpose." Something in the way that he said this made an impression. There was almost silence, and 1 or 2 of the Tooks pricked up their ears. "Indeed, for 3 purposes. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 11 years is too short a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits." Tremendous outburst of approval. "I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve." This was unexpected and rather difficult. There was some scattered clapping, but most of them were trying to work it out and see if it came to a compliment. Last week, I spent the entire discussion time talking about Hobbit birthday gifts. I left no time to talk about any of the things we came across in last week's reading. Now, of course, we've already done Word Nerd Wednesdays on Gross, as well as many of the names of the Hobbit families invited to the party within a party. Today, though, I want to take a moment to chat about the fireworks just a little bit before we move on to the items from today's reading. Now, in 1968, Tolkien wrote a letter to Donald Swann. He's the composer with whom Tolkien had worked to produce the book The Road Goes Ever On, setting some of Tolkien's verse to song. In the letter, Tolkien is complaining about a BBC documentary about himself and says, "They appeared completely confused between me and my story, and I was made to attend a fireworks show, a thing I have not done since I was a boy. Fireworks have no special relation to me. They appear in the books, and would have done even if I disliked them, because they are part of the representation of Gandalf, bearer of the Ring of Fire, the Kindler, the most childlike aspect shown to the hobbits being fireworks." But as Hammond and Skull point out in their Reader's Companion, this is an argument after the fact. Gandalf was already associated with fireworks in The Hobbit, and fireworks reappeared in The Lord of the Rings with the second version of a long-expected party long before Tolkien conceived the 3 elven rings. Oops. All right, on to today's reading, at least briefly. There's the mention of Bilbo's embroidered silk waistcoat or waistcoat. But of course, we learn nothing about the production of silk in the Shire or if it's imported anywhere else in Middle-earth. Now, as for waistcoats, and I had to be given the correct pronunciation, but as we Americans might know them, vests, Tolkien had a fondness for them himself. In letter number 213, the one where he says that he is, in fact, a hobbit in all but size, he says later, I like and even dare to wear in these dull days ornamental waistcoats. Now, the Springle ring, according to Tolkien in his nomenclature, is an invented name for a vigorous ring dance in which dancers often leaped up. It's also mentioned, by the way, in Tolkien's poem Bombadil Goes Boating, found in The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. There, Farmer Maggot's daughters did the Springle ring. But it also shows up in Ring of Words, which I referenced yesterday about Eleventy-One. There, they point out that in the previous draft of this passage, the dance was called the flip-flap. The meaning here is perhaps the one given in the OED as a kind of somersault in which the performer throws himself over on his hands and feet alternately. Now, they also point out that the OED mentions a word, springle, from the 18th and 19th centuries, meaning a young man, youth, or stripling, and saying that this sense of springle would be quite appropriate, even if Tolkien had used it only to imply that the dancers were normally young. But it could also be a learned joke based on the fact that springle has a meaning very similar to that of halfling. As for the half of you, half as well as you like bit, well, maybe we can talk about whether that's an insult or not next week. For now, though, folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Come back next week as Bilbo explains the other two reasons why he's gathered these 144 people here for his speech before he promptly disappears. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for another repeated attempt at reading poetry. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.